Whether you're in a new specialty or a new office or a new situation or you're staying put, think about the impact that fresh perspective can have. Walk into your office through the main doors. Take a look at the waiting room and your exam rooms with a fresh set of eyes. Seek out feedback from your patients about what you could be doing better or differently, and then make changes based on that feedback. Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Struggling with what to purchase for the person on your list that seems to have everything? Check out Luna and Grace. When you shop here, you're working directly with PA owner and creator Erica, who is with you on the personalization journey from start to finish. I had her make customized Rosie the Riveter meets masked clinician tumblers for my PA and NP colleagues during COVID. Not only are they personalized right down to their names and hair colors, they're durable and super high quality. So much so that I got one for myself. Shop Luna and Grace because everyone deserves to have something special that was made just for them. Stepped out of your shoes as a provider or out of that lab coat and into the gown of being a patient? For me, other than the times when I've given birth to my kiddos, I have never stayed in the hospital overnight. I've enjoyed a life largely void of serious health events, major surgeries, and hospitalizations. But that streak came to an end recently when I ended up in the ER with peritonitis, convinced that I had appendicitis and needed my appendix out. In today's episode of The PA is In, I'm sharing the hidden realities of what it's like to be on the flip side, from patient to provider, that often go unspoken about as healthcare workers. But before we get started, here's the PA is In review of the week. This is a 5-star review entitled Love This. Tracy talks real life and real PA. Her passion is contagious, and I love tuning in to get a new perspective on life as a PA, a mom, and a wife. Star emoji. These reviews truly mean the world to me. I check them every week, and I adore when you take the time to leave us this feedback. It helps other PAs to find the show. Bonus points if you leave us a 5-star review with emojis in your review. Head to iTunes, leave a review, and maybe you'll hear your review on an upcoming episode of The PA is In. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you about my experience with the ER, the OR, peritonitis, and post-operative complications on today's episode of The PA is In. Before I dive into telling you what no one is telling you about being the patient who knows a little more than the average patient, I wanted to share a little bit about my own journey and experience with being a patient. A few weeks ago, I developed generalized abdominal pain. It was more than just a stomach ache, and it didn't quite feel like GERD, and I was hoping like hell that it was just a touch of constipation, but no such luck. I remember telling Dan the first day of having pain that I was convinced I needed surgery. I told him something was wrong. Something just doesn't feel right. I tried stretching and shifting and taking a walk, and I prayed that if I could only poop, that my abdominal pain would resolve. I went about my day. I even recorded a podcast episode that day, an interview with Caleb Pepperday. But by the evening, I was convinced that something more was going on. I had tried over-the-counter NSAIDs and heat with no relief. At this point, I would say that my pain was a 3 or 4 on a scale of 1 to 10, and it was in all 4 quadrants of my belly. Throughout that night, my pain increased. I was tossing and turning, but every time I moved, there was this jolt in my right lower quadrant. Oof. You don't have to be a former general surgery PA like me to recognize that appendicitis should be high on the differential for this patient. So it's now 3 a.m. My pain is a 6 or a 7. It's gone from generalized to right lower quadrant. It's gone from sort of dull and aching to a sharp stabbing pain. So I'm laying there, it's 3 a.m. I Googled MD Calc appendicitis risk score, right? So I calculated my own Alvarado risk score to stratify myself for appendicitis. And after tossing and turning my way to dawn, I got up, I showered, and I told Dan that I had to go to the ER for a CAT scan. He stepped in to handle daycare drop-off and getting the boys on the bus on a day that would normally be my day while I packed my things. And I got this bag of, I think I'm going to be admitted to the hospital. Or if not admitted, I think I'm going to spend the whole day in the hospital and end up with my appendix out. Put all that stuff in my backpack and I headed to the ER. So I actually drove myself into my old stomping ground. So I went to the hospital where I was most comfortable, where I practiced general surgery. And let me tell you, by the time I got to the hospital, which is probably 15, 20 minutes from our house, those speed bumps into the patient parking garage reinforced the fact that I did, in fact, need to be seen in the ER. So one CT after 4 different IV sticks later, it was confirmed. Acute appendicitis. And in came the resident working for my former general surgery attending. So a long day of waiting to be the add-on case in the OR and 1 laparoscopic appendectomy and a general anesthesia stint later, I was waking up in the PACU, sans appendix. So I was discharged the next morning, which was, oh, by the way, Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to me, and sent home to continue my postoperative recovery. They told me no lifting over 15 pounds, no twisting or jumping, no skiing. And much to my chagrin, they said, just take it easy. Don't overdo it. No aggressive walking, no hiking until my 2-week postoperative visit. My post-surgery recovery was largely without event. Went home, I had a light Thanksgiving meal, was back on my feet, but taking it easy. And I even lectured on stage at my state conference a week post-op, but not so fast. So 10 days post-operatively, I woke up with abdominal pain, diarrhea, a fever, and tachycardia. I had shaking chills. I was sweaty. Something was wrong. Of course, I'm like, I meet SIRS criteria with a potential intra-abdominal collection as a source. 1 stat outpatient CT with oral contrast later, and we'd ruled out a postoperative collection as a source of my fever. I was diagnosed with left-sided colitis. This was the worst GI bug that I've had in a while. And I say worst and like most lingering. So I think I've had GI bugs that were more severe but short-lived. This one felt like it was a long course of diarrhea and belly pain and just not feeling myself. So made it a bit of a bumpy chicken noodle soup and cracker filled couple of days until I felt healthy and relatively healed. I'm happy to report that I'm fever-free, belly pain-free. My bowels have returned to normal. Post-operatively, I've been cleared to ski and lift and do all of the things that I've been wanting to do for these last 2 weeks. I know that you are so relieved to know the status of my post-operative bowel movements and that everything has returned to normal from that standpoint. Since we interrupt this broadcast with a very important announcement. You are not making enough money. Your practice and your physician do not understand the value you are adding to their patients, and therefore you aren't earning what you're worth. If in the past your requests for a raise have been met with one single word, no. If you're working more hours than ever and seeing more patients, but you're not making any more money and you're feeling pissed about it. If you feel like you've hit the ceiling of your income band, this guide is for you. I've compiled the 5 most costly and most common mistakes that PAs make when asking for a raise, and I've told you how to avoid them and what to do instead. Download your free guide at tracybingaman.com/mistakes. It's the day that I ditched my appendix and navigated the healthcare system as a patient, getting admitted, not the provider doing the admitting, I have made some pretty significant realizations. I have given this experience a lot of thought and realized that having my appendix out and going through this experience as a patient of the healthcare system has changed my perspective. I've been able to view the system and the nuances of our healthcare system from a fresh set of eyes. So, now that I've set the stage for what happened when I got my appendix out, I realize that I am privileged to know how to navigate the system and to know what to expect and what surgery I needed, and to know that these symptoms needed evaluation. And also, I'm acknowledging that I am a relatively healthy person who had an acute problem that got fixed with one single hospitalization and one single surgery. And that also I have this background of this intimate knowledge and familiarity with the healthcare system, the way it works, the surgery, and even specifically the surgeon that did my surgery. So, without further ado, here are the things that I've learned through this appendectomy experience as a patient. Number one, every patient deserves your compassion and full attention. I absolutely, as a provider, have been guilty of being distracted and not being as patient and compassionate and attentive to my patients as they deserved. Each and every patient that you see on any given day, you may be seeing many other patients on your schedule and have many other things that you're dealing with, but that patient has one appointment, one visit to the ER, one opportunity to have an interaction with you where you get to build trust and you get to make them feel seen and heard and comfortable as a part of this crazy healthcare system that we work in. The next thing that I learned is that the wheels of the healthcare system turn slowly. Now, I already knew this because as a surgery PA, I realized that in the operating room, sometimes it takes a long time to get an add-on into the OR, up from the ER into a bed, into the OR for a prep and hold. And the surgeon who was taking care of me that day had a slew of scheduled cases that they were going to do before they did my urgent but not emergent appendectomy at the end of the day, which meant that I was NPO for 18 plus hours before I went to the OR. And that also I was just left alone with my own thoughts to kind of stew and think about these things as I was sitting and waiting in the ER, on the med surg floor, and even in pre-op holding. Yes, I know as the provider that you are juggling lots of things and that you were doing your best to triage things. So I get that because I've been on that side of it too. The next thing that I realized as a part of this appendectomy experience is that familiarity leads to a level of comfort. I walked into an ER where I am very comfortable, where I have personally seen countless patients, probably countless patients with appendicitis. I was cared for by an attending in the ER who I knew and trusted. And also, as a part of my team, I had a slew of nurses, techs, a CRNA, my residents, and my attending surgeon who I knew personally. This familiarity led me to be very comfortable throughout this entire experience. I was actually group texting my book club while I was in the hospital, and they said, I've never heard someone so calm who's about to get emergency surgery, because I wasn't nervous. I wasn't unsure. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew exactly what to expect. I knew and absolutely trusted the team that was taking care of me. And that was such a huge comfort to me as a part of this process. Just a reminder to you that the next time you see a patient, even if you don't have a long-standing history with them, that taking a little bit of time and treating them with compassion and, letting them ask their questions will lead to that familiarity, which will help that patient to feel more comfortable with you and with the team and with the plan of care. Next, I want to remind you and to remind myself that listening to your body is important. For me, this was a really big deal, particularly postoperatively. I used to tell my postoperative patients that they would have good days and bad days, and that their healing wouldn't be linear, and that their bodies would tell them when they had overdone it with messages in the form of sleepiness and needing to take a nap and feeling overwhelmed or sore or achy. And I would remind them to heed these signs and to back off. There was absolutely a part of my postoperative recovery where 1 week out from getting my appendix out, I had 3 busy days in a row. I had a day where I lectured on stage at a CME conference, and I drove to that conference. I spent 12 hours there, and I got to see a bunch of people that I knew, did a lot of socializing, networking, had a meal, all of these things, hopped up on stage in the afternoon, drove home in the evening, but all told, it was a 14 or 15-hour day. And then the next day, I had a day of clinic and an evening where we had a patient appreciation event at our office. Following day, I went back to clinic, and that night we had our holiday party for our office. Those 3 days in a row really knocked me out. And I had to spend the weekend recovering because towards the end of the day, I would feel my abdominal wall was getting sore, and my umbilical laparoscopic incision was aching and hurting, and just sort of reminding me that, hey, you're kind of pushing it and you're not yet at 100%. Next up is to trust your gut, or in this case, your appendix. I knew something was wrong, but also that inner knowing, that still small voice was in the background of my logical clinical reasoning of my own situation. See me in severe pain calculating my own Alvarado risk score, or hear me telling Dan, I think I need my appendix out, but I also want to go to the OR when it's inflamed enough to pop positive on a CT, but not so long that it's perforated and I end up with a drain and an ongoing need for IV antibiotics or a subsequent washout or any of these things. Bless Dan and his incredible patience with me during this whole experience. Speaking of Dan, the next thing that I learned about this experience was that you can't do this life, whether healthy or sick, alone. No man, woman, or child is an island. This experience reminded me that it takes a village, and this is specifically notable when you're not at your best. I had to lean on my husband, my friends, my team in producing this podcast, my amazing virtual assistant, Sarah, in canceling and rescheduling things like interviews and speaking engagements and appearances. It took me getting over that hump of asking for help and leaning on those who I love and want to support me without guilt to really start to feel better, because I did need rest as I was recovering from initially the appendectomy and then from the GI bug. I was not at my best. I was not able to be mobile and active and doing some of these things that I had previously committed to doing. Next up, especially when you know a lot about something, it's difficult to be the patient and take off that provider hat. This was especially obvious to me when I had this post-op fever and pain that resulted in needing this CAT scan. I texted my dearest PA friend, Tara, and I told her, these are my vitals, these are my symptoms. And I told her that I was going to tough it out and drink some water and see how I felt in a few hours. Immediately, she said to me, if this was a post-op patient of yours, would you want to know? And that's all it took for me to pick up the phone and text my surgeon. And in all of 3 text messages, they let me know that stat CT was being ordered, that their office was going to call with an appointment at what hospital it was being done, that this was the plan for contrast. And I also know that access to the surgeon is a privilege, right? So having that person's cell phone number really expedited that CAT scan. I do think I would have gotten the CAT scan ordered, but I would have had to call and, go through the proper channels as opposed to having that person's personal cell phone number, which is a little benefit of being a provider when you're navigating this system. But it was hard for me to be objective about my own situation postoperatively, because I was like, this is just a bug. And Tara was like, but what if it's not, right? We don't know for sure that it's not a postoperative collection and abscess. And if this were your patient, you would want to know that this was happening, that this is how they're feeling, that this is what's going on at home, if this was a patient you were taking care of. The next thing is a little bit funny, but also seriously, how do we not have a better design for hospital gowns? Hospital gowns afford us no privacy, particularly in the backside. I get the functionality of the open back and with those ties and to be able to untie it as you're moving someone onto the table. I get it. Also, getting from my room, which was 2 doors down from the bathroom in the emergency department, was an exercise. And my main goal was to have as little pain as possible. So I was walking pretty gingerly. And my second goal was not flashing any of my former colleagues my underwear in the emergency department. Also, there's something about changing out of your clothes into that gown that made me feel like a nameless, faceless patient. Like I was incredibly exposed and vulnerable. I also didn't love that I didn't have a bra on. That was really bothering me. But also the fact that I was wearing the same gown as everyone else in the hospital or in the ER. That like it somehow made it feel like I was less me than before I put the gown on. So just remember that when you're taking care of patients, that they are in this place, that they are vulnerable and exposed and in pain and not feeling their best, but also maybe not feeling like they are themselves because they are in that gown. And yes, I know gowns are important and they matter, and that sometimes we have these situations where we have to have patients in gowns so we can access them, so that we can operate on them, so that we can, get to the part of them that needs to be examined or assessed or operated on. I get it. A new perspective can be refreshing. I don't necessarily recommend getting your appendix out if you can help it. Not that it was that bad, but let's avoid any potential complications in future intra-abdominal scar tissue if at all possible. But that being said, this experience has offered me a new perspective, and that in and of itself has been refreshing. It reminded me of what it's like to be a patient and what it feels like to be nervously waiting in a room to be evaluated, or to be uncomfortable or in pain as someone is examining you. That new perspective is something that as providers, we want to just remember that this is a new experience for them. And even though you're seeing your 17th patient of the day, that this may be anxiety provoking, a new or vulnerable experience, and try to see it from their standpoint, even though it's par for the course for you. Next up, recovery is not linear. Whether it's that I overdid it a couple of times during the postoperative period and needed to rest, or the rest and hydration that I needed to get over that ill-timed colitis, my recovery was certainly not linear. I wish I had been better about educating my patients when I was reviewing with them what they can expect during postoperative recovery now that I've experienced it. Now, as providers, we don't always have the opportunity to live through the experiences that we are educating our patients about, but we can seek feedback from patients who have had this surgery and maybe ask someone who had an appendectomy, hey, what do you wish that I had told you preoperatively when you're seeing them on their postoperative visit? You can elicit that feedback from other people to help you to better educate your patients beforehand so that they can know what to expect. I had a trainer this year, clinically, who we were doing some education on Botox and fillers. And they said to me, anything you say to a patient before the procedure is education. Anything you say afterwards is an excuse. And that really resonated with me, because if you're educating them beforehand and you're saying, this is what to expect, if you feel this, it's normal, if this happens, don't worry, if this happens, call us, that's education. If you're saying those things afterwards, if they call your office with a problem and you say, oh yeah, no problem, that's normal to have pain in your belly button incision after appendectomy, that's an excuse because you didn't warn them about it beforehand. So if you can front end your patient education and tell them beforehand what to expect, then it doesn't feel like an excuse to them, and it saves them the trouble of worrying if something's wrong and calling you and sort of using resources in that way. The next thing, and this one was hard for me, is when you're the patient and not the provider, don't pretend to be the expert. Don't let the fact that you have a medical background mean that you feel uncomfortable asking questions. There are no stupid questions, and it's unreasonable to expect that you know everything about every condition or procedure or recovery that's done in any area of medicine. Ask those questions. Work to understand what you can expect, especially if you're having something done that's outside the realm of how you've ever practiced before. Next, I refuse to accept the phrase PAs make the worst patients. And actually, as I'm saying that, I realize that I'm not sure I've even ever heard anyone say that phrase. But I do think I've heard it said for nurses and for physicians. But alas, you don't have to be a bad patient and you don't have to have bad luck simply because you work in healthcare. Be compliant, or as compliant as you can, and trust the experts. Ask all the questions that you can to understand what's going to happen and what you can expect after your procedure, after your medication, whatever it is. Be curious and bring a beginner's mindset to the experience if at all possible. Don't let your pride get in the way of really understanding what you can expect on a new medication or a new procedure. Next, gratitude goes a long way. So as I mentioned, I was discharged from the hospital on Thanksgiving Day. And on that day, I made a point to say a discreet and specific thank you to each person who cared for me that day. I've been there working on a holiday. So I thank the nurse and the environmental services team and the sweet person who took my breakfast order on that iPad and my resident and attending who were working that day who discharged me from the hospital. Specifically, I said, I know it's Thanksgiving and you'd rather be home with your family and friends, but I really appreciate you working today and taking care of me. You should have seen the surprise on their faces when I said this. We aren't used to being thanked by our patients, and this system is not designed for these types of deep and grateful interactions. So that was something that I took out of this experience. Last but certainly not least, doing surgery is not the same as recovering from surgery. It's strange, but true. I've probably taken out dozens of appendici in my years as a general surgery PA. Lots of appendixes. Those weren't specifically notable, except maybe a few cases that I could tell you details about the patient and the case and the situation. They start to blend together. Not because I didn't care about my patients, because I did, but taking out appendix became a normal part of my job. It was an everyday occurrence. It was something I did regularly. So they started to all kind of blend together. This is very different when you are the patient. I will never forget this experience of being the patient when I had my appendix out. It just hits differently. It's way more personal. It's closer to home and it's more memorable and a completely different experience to be the patient than it is to be the person performing the surgery. The bottom line here is that I'm grateful for this experience, and I love any experience that shifts my way of thinking and reminds me that my perspective is always and will always be limited by my experience. But that also that my perspective and a shift in my perspective or a broadening of my horizon can improve the way that I show up for my patients. So I hope that today's episode inspires you to think about how you can improve care and the care that you're providing to your patients on a daily basis and how they might feel when you say or do certain things. Whether you're in a new specialty or a new office or a new situation or you're staying put, think about the impact that that fresh perspective can have. Walk into your office through the main doors. Take a look at the waiting room and your exam rooms with a fresh set of eyes. Seek out feedback from your patients about what you could be doing better or differently, and then make changes based on that feedback. This experience has truly been an eye-opening one for me, and I'm so excited that I get to share this experience on a platform like this one with you. Thank you, as always, for taking time to tune into the PAs in and hear all about my appendectomy and my diarrhea and my postoperative abdominal pain and fever, because it can help you to have a new perspective on how you're taking care of your patients too. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.